Hi everyone, it's Thursday night. I just wanted to tape a little video around, again, as the conversation started for week 8. In week 8, you have several questions that are sort of suggested to you in the discussion forum. But progressively, you'll see that these conversations are leading you towards a reflection around leadership theory, leadership approaches, styles, whichever you want to call them, and technology integration. So it's going to be a bit of a quick refresher of your 501 and maybe just to check your bases in terms of leadership theory and leadership approach and how you are seeing all of this material, and then to try and help you connect with our topic in this course, so technology integration. This week we focus on leadership theory and approaches and a return to leadership theory. Next week, we'll look more specifically at the literature on management of change and all the things that we have to be aware in management of change, and the different frameworks and models, and that should be useful to you directly in your in relation to your assignment, to move along in your sort of case study that you're imagining and then addressing. So, objective for today is going to be a very short video. I'm just going to again revisit the overall history and typology of leadership theory. There's a lot of leadership theory out there, and usually the challenge is actually to organize them in a way that's useful to you. So I'm going to propose a typology of leadership theory, ones that you will see appear in different texts, but I'm also going to post a text which is just a very short manual, and you will see suddenly that that typology appearing in there. I think you're going to find it useful in your reflection. The point is not to go into every single leadership theory, there are hundreds, but to have a good overview and to be able to look at which category is the one that is going to be more useful in our reflection around technology integration. So typology, again, it's a way of categorizing this leadership. So I'm going to offer you a typology in four categories, and that way you'll be able to have that reflection around leadership theory in a global way without going into too many details about specific theories. And then I'll let you think and reflect for this week about the usefulness of these different categories in respect to technology integration. And then, as I said, next week we go on to management of change, and we'll look at that. I'm sorry I'm posting this on Thursday, but at the same time, I knew you were finishing off the assignments and posting your big team assignment, so I didn't want to rush you. I think we'll have this whole long weekend anyway, because I'm not going to post the conversation of week 9 until Tuesday. So it gives you a few days, and obviously you can continue that reflection right through next week. These two conversations are not completely distinct; they are connected. But it'll be helpful if first you focus on leadership theory, and then next week we look specifically at the literature around management of change. So the proposed typology I'm putting forward for you is to really look at leadership under this sort of lens and to try and categorize all the ones you encounter into 4 different types. The first category is what we call general trait theories, which includes trait leadership theory, but also more generally a whole bunch of other theories which are usually grouped under that. The next one is behavior theories. The following category is contingency theories, and the other one are power inference theories. So it's interesting as a typology because it also follows a sort of historical progression. You'll see that obviously trait theories are much more traditional and often in history date back further, and then we've progressively moved on to behavioral theories and then to contingency theories, and some of the power and influence theories are emerging as some of the favorite sort of theories in the contemporary literature, particularly when we look at transformational. But obviously, it's not always that linear. You will see people go back and forth in this progression, historical progression, and also people tapping from different theories within these 40 categories. But they are useful to sort of understand what you're looking at, and then I think it's going to be very useful for you to connect with the process that we're looking at in terms of technology integration. So trait theories, I've given you the question there that each of these groups of theories are trying to really address. So in terms of trait theories, the question they're trying to address is, or the way they're framing the question is, what type of person makes a good leader? So all of these theories have in common this notion that being a good leader is a sort of an innate quality, that you're born a good leader, that it doesn't really take work or reflection, but that certain people just have the right characteristics, the right traits to be able to do that. So within that category, you'll find trait leadership theory itself as a subcategory, great man theory, charismatic leadership, right? Those are three types that we would group as being trait theories. Now, I'm going to give you a hint already to help you in reflection. I'm not sure that these group of leadership theories are going to be terribly useful to us. First of all, they're a bit dated, but also it doesn't help us much if we really think about ideal leadership as being something which is just that you're born with. And when it comes to technology, I think it's something that's going to need more of a theories that are more focused on the reflective process of leadership, rather than just saying this is these are the the sort of characteristics that we're looking for. Some people are just born with them. The second group was very popular in the 70s, 80s. If you look at management, MBA books and management books, a lot of leadership was focused on that sort of category of leadership, and they're normally called behavior theory. So you've probably seen this before, because it's sort of a categorization within behavioral theories that is very common. So the question there that these authors are trying to say is, what does a good leader do? So the focus now is not just on how they're born, what features they have, but what are some of the acts, some of the gestures that they do, and how can we characterize these gestures to sort of extract different types of leadership. And within that, you'll find autocratic, democratic, laissez-faire, and bureaucratic. Autocratic is where all the power is focused. It's very like as a pyramid, very hierarchical, and you have someone at the top, which is very much a decision maker. That is, it's not always negative. The autocratic leadership, also someone can have some good vision and they being very objective focused, but it does raise lots of questions about communication within the organization, and that the power suddenly is focused and concentrated at the top, and then there's some issues with how that what repercussions that has in terms of internal organization. Democratic is when that pyramid is broken down, so it's the opposite, and when someone you still have a position, within the hierarchy, the organizational hierarchy, but there's a lot of focus on creating links between the lower echelons and that executive sort of direction, and about creating dialogue and being a good listener at all levels of these hierarchies, and trying to sort of to reduce the disconnection between people who are employees and followers and people who are leaders. Laissez-faire is this notion that really it works very well, but not terribly well in school. Laissez-faire works really well in sort of in creative environments, in sort of things like partnerships, law firms, where many people are bringing talent and usually have a very similar hierarchical position. And then the point is not to direct these people, or in creative process as well, it's very popular, but to rather just have a sort of organizational, conversational sort of role. So within partnership, for example, you'll often see a senior partner, but the senior partner is really often doesn't have that much power, but really is just a sort of spokesperson for all of the people that have very similar sort of roles within the environment. As I said, not terribly popular in schools, and we can imagine why. And bureaucratic obviously looks back at sort of very very sort of industrial revolution, heavy organization, very pyramidal and hierarchical, and looking also at a lot of government environment function like this. Bureaucratic is all the things that really we're not really in a contemporary world working towards. The machine, so it's a lot of wheels within the machine, everything is set in place, people fall into a role rather than bring in their own talent or personality. And there's, as I said, a very steep hierarchy, and people really don't have much chance to question that pyramid and that hierarchy, and they really just have to fit into the job profile that already pre-exists and carry on working, making the system work. So some of these behavioral theories, I think, are going to be relevant a little bit relevant in terms of technology integration. Maybe not all of them, but certainly when the notion of democratic leadership hasn't gone out of flavor that much, it's still talked about. So you may want to explore it a little bit, because when we looked at stakeholders and we looked at listening to stakeholders, I'm just giving you a cue there, you may be wanting to explore democratic leaderships. And there are authors that have already talked about how that could be useful in technological integration. Contingency theories are fairly complex, so I'm going to read them all, or the four. There are many more, but four that you will see often. Path goal theory is used a lot, so you probably have come across it already, or if you haven't, you should maybe just go on Google. These are all very, very common sort of theories, and you want to find lots of summaries, concise sort of info sites on the web. Path goal, fairly easy to grasp as well. Tilda's contingency model, slightly different, but not that different. Leadership process model and situational leadership. If you had a little bit of time and needed to look at two, I'd look at path goal theory and situational leadership, because they're fairly similar, although they differ in very specific ways. All of these answer the question that authors are posing themselves: how does the situation influence good leadership? So all of these are easy to spot, because they are always, instead of having a sort of dyadic relationship between follower and leader, they are now saying it's actually about the leader, the follower, the employee, but it's also about the environment. And they will talk about the task and look at the complexity of the task and the environment. So this is going to be interesting for us too, and I think you're going to see a link there, especially with situational leadership and a little bit with path goal theory. You're going to see a link with some of the ecological theory I've talked about, because really situational leadership cannot be sort of formatted or constructed or thought out without taking a hard good look at the environment and look at all the variables that are also going to influence the relationship between the leader and the follower. So this is starting to be more interesting for us in terms of technology, because a lot of people will argue that we need something like a contingency theory, that in terms of leadership, we don't just need someone who has skills and a certain vision or a certain model of leadership, but we need someone who can take into account the environment, particularly because that environment is so complex, as we've seen with the number of stakeholders, but also because it's an environment that is fast changing. So those variables are very strong, and we've already discussed them around this course, how dramatic they can be in terms of influencing this process that we're looking at in terms of technology integration. So my thought is you might be interested in exploring contingency theories, not all of them, but looking in general as a category, how they may be useful to you in looking at technology integration. The last ones are usually called power and influence theory, and they refer really to this question that all of these authors are asking themselves: what is the source of a leader's power in terms of influence and power? So not just how are they born and what features do they have, not in terms of behavior theories, what are the acts that they do and what categorizes them in terms of gestures and behaviors. Not contingency, because they're not that bothered by the environment for the last ones, but they're looking at this notion: people follow a leader. Why do they follow a leader? What's the source of this sort of natural authority that leaders have? And so all of these theories are going to be interested in motivation, in employee motivation, and in particularly going to look at implicit, extrinsic motivation and implicit motivation. So probably you've read texts from Decky and Ryan, who have sort of coined this distinction between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic is everything that you that drives you and feed your motivation, but are external. And really everything. So it could be from money, but also time off, recognition, validation from your peers, tap on the back from your boss, visibility, status. All of these things are forms of intrinsic motivation, things that make you do something, but really are a response to something that you want from the outside world. Intrinsic motivation is defined by Dick and Ryan, something which is really related to self-realization. So if you think back to things like Maslow's pyramid of needs, although it's been contested now in terms of what should really be at the bottom and at the top, but certainly everyone agrees that at the very top of that pyramid of needs, whichever way you define it and whatever you put in it, at the very top is probably self-realization. So doing something just because you want to do it, because it makes you a better person or makes you grow. And that's a very high sort of need. And Decky and Ryan argue that that's intrinsic motivation, that sometimes we work simply because we want to do something, we want to achieve something, and it has no other sort of recognition or validation from the outside world. Obviously, intrinsic motivation in terms of employment is going to be something incredible. It's very powerful, because then you're not telling people what to do, they're actually doing it themselves. So within this category, you have some theories that are looking at extrinsic motivation and others that are looking at intrinsic motivation. So you have French and Raven's 5 forms of power, servant leadership, and people argue whether servant leadership should be there or not. It really depends how you define servant leadership. Servant leadership can be sometimes, in the worst case scenario, defined as laissez-faire, where the leader doesn't actually do anything. In other terms, servant leadership is really framed or defined in a different way of saying it's not the action of not doing anything. It's not letting people actually behave the way they want. It's actually very subtly making them think as if you are their equal and you're not making them do something. So there's still there this element of influence. So you're not telling them what to do, but you're managing to still assert yourself as a natural leader while letting them do as they feel they please. Then you have transactional leadership, which is very focused on extrinsic motivation, so the character can stick in a very subtle way, but still looking at influence as being a result of that. And then you have the other one, which sort of sets itself against transactional leadership. Most evolved transformation leadership, I told you that all this sort of follows a historical linear progression too, and certainly transformation leadership is a sort of buzzword. It's what you're going to see really. The field at the moment is really focused on being the sort of most sophisticated elaboration of all these different theories that we've looked at. And transformational leadership definitely sets itself against transactional leadership, particularly because it's saying we don't want to tap into extrinsic motivation, but we want to tap into intrinsic motivation. A transformation leader is an inspirational leader, someone who models things for others, someone who actually gets others to work for the organization's goal, but while actually acquiring or working towards intrinsic motivation. So it really makes you feel like you are wanting to be part of this organization. You are wanting to work for its goals. A little more complex than that, but I've explained in a nutshell. So all of these are going to be interested because we've seen that there's a lot of factors of resistance. We have a lot of stakeholders. We have a lot of people who disagree on things. And so obviously being able to spin your influence to make people integrate technology is going to be very important. And so there's probably going to be a discussion here whether the best we can hope for is a transactional leadership sort of model within technology integration, or whether we can actually achieve something more sophisticated, something more advanced, such as transformation leadership. And if so, how do we do that? So I think I've given you enough to work with. The point, obviously, is not to go back into a whole course on leadership theory. It's to really just give you, again, a refresh of the basics so that we can apply that directly into reflection into your assignment. But we do have to have reflection, right? In your case study, you're trying to, implement a specific change with regard to technology. So you are going to have to give some thought to which sort of type, which category of leadership theory or approach you are seeing as best suited for the work that you're trying to do. I'm available if you have any questions, and I'm also going to attach a document which I've used in previous courses, which is not very, well, it is academic, but it's not, the tone isn't terribly academic. So you've got references and it's very sound, but it's really written as a sort of handbook to employee or introduction to leadership. So it's fairly readable. I've had good feedback from students. It doesn't get too complex. And I think you'll be able to grasp some important element there that will help you in your reflection on technology integration and leadership approaches. And it does use the same sort of typology. As again, I didn't invent this. There's several authors that return to this. It's just a convenient sort of lens, and several people have adopted that, although there's other ways to categorize them as well. It's just a tool for convenience. So I'm going to cut it there and stop now recording, and I'll post that now. So have a good long weekend. At this point, I've started marking your team assignments. They are showing as in marking. I'll be done by the end of the weekend. You should all be working towards your major assignment, and as school finishes and you're all catching your breath, you may want to go back and make sure that you are also have enough postings for assignment 3, although you still have obviously 2 weeks to do that. So I wish you a good night, and I wish you a good weekend. I'll speak to you later. If you do want support for your assignment 4, feel free to book appointments with me. I am sort of busy. I'm still teaching other courses, and I'm doing a lot of admin work at the moment. But if you give me a little bit of notice, we can set up a collaborate session on one-on-one. Or you can send me drafts if that's what you want, or skeleton, and I can give you sort of quick feedback by email as well if you do want a bit of formative feedback before you submit. So have a good weekend and speak to you soon. Bye.